Okay, Steve, it looks like we're on the air, ready to go for another session.
Another one, another surprise session.
Yeah,
This
we've
will be
got
good.
Debbie's joined us. Debbie's joined us, I can see already
Hey,
in the
Debbie, how are
chat.
you?
Giving a shout out there. Hello, Debbie.
Very good. So I see you're standing.
Yeah, here I am standing today. My desk is up. That plant there is new since last time.
See that?
I'm days away from getting all the final parts to my computer. Hey, Hans. And hopefully we'll get that in the backdrop shortly, which should be nice. But the reason I'm standing is that at 9 p.m. last night, I delivered 4 hours of training into Europe on the customer data platform. And that brought me to 1 a.m. this morning. I then had 2 hours sleep and was up at 3:30. So it was only 2 hours sleep because I took half hour to get sleep. And then I was up and delivered a PowerApps training session to North America. And then I've done two podcast recordings this morning already, and it's only 10 a.m. in the morning. So I'm standing because if I was sitting, I'd probably be asleep. Hey, Scott, how are you? Prashant, how's it going, mate?
Yeah, so I bought one of those electric stand-up desks, a little push button. I think I told you the only time I've lifted it was to show people that it will lift.
No, I use it quite a bit. Anytime I want to be kind of more alert and, not fall asleep, like you can slouch in the chair and, I find that I
haven't gotten a habit. I seem to forget about it. I'm just not in the habit of standing and sitting and standing and sitting.
So what I do, though, mine's got a timer on it. So 45 minutes, it gives me a little beep, beep, beep and says change whatever position you're in. So then I just hit the button to go to my standard sit height, pull my chair in, take a seat, and then, 45 minutes later, beep, 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 pop it back up. And you can change the time settings. That's a kind of.
So at least you got something to keep you from just getting in a zone and forgetting about it.
Yeah, totally. So I don't know if you noticed, but last Saturday, Ross, last weekend, the Scottish Summit, happened.
Yeah.
James Phillips did the opener on it. I think somebody posted out there if you watched every session back to back, it takes you through to March 2022 because that's how many hours of recorded content. Something like over 700 hours of recorded content from the Scottish Summit. How legendary is that?
That's pretty amazing. Did you do any sessions in it?
No.
No, me neither. I didn't even apply.
No.
It seemed like they had plenty.
This is a thing. I think what we're seeing now is these guys, Mark Christie and Ian Connolly, what they've done is created a platform for all the newcomers to come in, cut their teeth on speaking. A lot of them were first-time speakers. Yep. I think that's golden, right? I think they're thinking generational. In other words, they're bringing on the next generation of speakers, those people that are going to get the opportunity to get access to audiences they traditionally never would. The fact that they made it multilingual, right? If you a Spanish speaker, your sessions were in Spanish, so all the other Spanish people can get it in their native language and stuff. I think, they had multiple languages represented. I just think it's
Microsoft doesn't even do that.
Yeah. I think it's the biggest event that's happened. I saw one of the posts, Microsoft event that's happened in the UK.
Wow.
This year. So pretty phenomenal.
Yeah, hats off to those guys. That's a hell of a lot of work. Put something like that together.
You imagine the amount of work, what I liked about them as well, the quality of their presentation, of their brand, everything, you just can't fault it, right? The swag that they send out, I know these fellas dip into their own pocket to fund a bit of this as well. It's not all covered by sponsors. And, even getting the sponsors on board, that's a hard work. That's not easy.
I'll tell you what, I think those two guys took this on as a personal challenge to make the biggest. They're in Scotland, not an area that you would expect to have a huge event out of, particularly when it was, in person.
Yeah.
And I think they just took it on as a personal challenge to kind of show the world, and boy, they succeeded. They definitely succeeded.
Yeah, and a top quality event. This is the thing, there would be folks out there that work for more professional events type organizations, and they would say, it wouldn't be the same quality. I think they've for a free event as well, they've absolutely met the quality mark, and both on content presentation, every element of what they've done has just been just on point, I feel.
Oh yeah, I think their stuff's superior to the stuff that people would pay to go to.
Yeah.
It's just another nail in the coffin to some of the organizations out there that were charging for events like this to have something that big. And since it's now all virtual, it's instantly a global event.
Yeah.
It's a global event. It's not a Scottish event anymore. It's a global event.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's awful difficult for folks to compete with paid events now, I think.
Yeah. I see that
any kind of paid content, really.
Both Prashant and Scott there that are on the call today, both of them were presenting at that event. Don't know if anyone else was, but I definitely saw their names in the lineup speaking. So well done, fellas. Good to see you presenting at that event. But of course, what's, I suppose, quite top of mind at the moment, I don't know who your guest is that's coming in today. That's going to be interesting when they show up. I didn't think you'd get anybody with, Ignite being in full effect, and all Microsoft FTEs will probably be, hands to the pump, answering questions and stuff virtually in forums and whatnot. But you've pulled something out of the hat here. Well done, well done. But have you had a chance to look at all the announcements at Ignite this year?
I have not. You mentioned an email that came out to us all, and I think I told you I've been distracted by my motorcycle and failed to be paying close attention to my email box. But you have some top of mind and I think you said it came off embargo this morning, so you can talk about it.
So the embargo's lifted. We got it under NDA as MVPs 24 hours ago. Now, a couple of things I find interesting. One, Alyssa Taylor has done a bunch of videos. When I say a bunch, I saw a video of Alyssa Taylor promoting the event.
Yeah.
What do you think was the product out of the PowerApps or the Power Platform suite of products? What do you think she was promoting?
Customer insights.
Nope. Power BI.
Power BI.
Yeah. Now that's what I find interesting, right? Is that we've known that the Power story has definitely involved Power BI, but it's never kind of been in, it's more data and analytics, right? It's not part of, but the fact that Alyssa was full on promoting these new features and functionality coming out in Power BI, I'm wondering if that's now really moving across and fully under the stable of BizApps from a control point. I didn't think it was for a long time.
Well, Power BI is another one of those applications that does not depend on Dynamics or PowerApps or Power Automate. It's another similar to Customer Insights. It's an application that can be used without any other Microsoft product, frankly, and just connect to anything you've got. So it's another one similar to that Customer Insights, that if you got a customer who just doesn't have any Microsoft products at all, there's one they could start with and get value out of, kind of immediately off whatever they already have in their house, which isn't necessarily the case with, Dynamics, which has to be built out and data populated before it turns into anything of value.
Totally. But, correct me if I'm wrong on the history of things. Right now, if you look at where Gartner looks at Power BI, it is not close to its competitors. It's far out and advanced, right? Top right-hand corner of the leader, innovation quadrant, that type of thing. My understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, James Phillips built that product to what it was. That was his baby before he came into BizApps and took over that stable. And my understanding was, he came into BizApps, that kind of carried on its own trajectory, even though he's kind of taken the word power that started there and then made it across everything. Now, I'm wondering though, are they going, you know what? It actually does sit in BizApps as where does it sit in the organization?
Where else would it sit?
Yeah. But the fact that Alyssa's promoting it like that tells me that that's maybe, a strategic initiative that they're bunting.
Probably what's happening is they're seeing some kind of a surge in usage.
Yep.
And based on that, they're saying, okay, let's throw some gas on that surge and let's put it front and center and throw some gas on that surge.
Yeah.
I don't think she's going to waste the time at Ignite on a product that's dormant, that they're trying to get some traction to. They're going to take the ones that have some traction,
and
throw
gasoline on
off.
it. Yeah,
that's what I think.
Now here's the thing. On the screen here, I've got what's called the Book of News, which is, as I say, under embargo until 6 a.m. Pacific time. Are we past 6 a.m. Pacific time?
Oh, well past.
Okay, so here's the only thing that kind of caught my attention. And when I say BizApps gets 3 pages in the entire document. They get a heading there, a Dynamics 365, and the talk is around some stuff around sales, marketing, customer service, field service, commerce, human resources. They're almost like blurbs for what the products are, rather than, what's absolutely amazing around these. But the one that got my attention is something that I've been working with recently, which is, of course, RPA, robotic process automation. Now, the RPA desktop product is, I don't know if you've had a chance to have a bit of a play with that. In New Zealand would call it having a bit of a tutu with it, to kind of understand what it can do. And this is the amazing thing. They have just released one of the biggest Trojan horses in the market, because what the announcement is that they're building, as in the future builds, it's about to be released to early access on Windows 10. They're bundling it for free into Windows 10.
Really?
The RPA desktop tool, which of course, if you put an on-premise data gateway in place, which is kind of like a 10-minute process, right, to set up in the Maker portal, straight away, you now can you can create triggers, events, that type of thing that feed into a cloud flow, and it just opens up so many possibilities. You can use it to, analyze local Excel spreadsheets. You can automate pretty much anything on your desktop that you wanted at an enterprise scale, and they're providing it free on the desktop, part of the Windows 10 operating system in the future releases.
I mean, the most interesting thing there is they're really thinking of it as an operating system level feature.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, the Office is the most used app in the world out there, and they didn't think to do that with Office, but for some reason or other, they've decided this particular feature should become a operating level feature.
Well, the reason is just because of the nature of it. It's designed to work with applications that don't fundamentally have APIs. And you don't need to be a programmer to use it. You can basically click record, click the area that you want to input, output data, that type of thing, give it that type of what it is, and next step. And it allows you to logically go through that. Once you've done it, hit play. You can switch it to unattended mode or attended mode. You get the choice.
But don't you need some kind of licensing for it, beyond Windows licensing?
Listen, this is what it says here. So I'm looking at here's the headline, which was released March the 2nd today. And it says, automate tasks with Power Automate Desktop for Windows 10, no additional cost.
Huh.
Right? And it talks about in 2020, we bought this company, Softomotive, and it goes on the story. Now, interesting, yesterday I interviewed the founder of Softomotive. So he's 9 months in Microsoft now. I had a chance to interview him, how he built this company over 15 years, started as a B2C product, and then B2B customers started coming to them and saying, hey, we want this. And that's what grew it. And they went through a Series 1 funding, got 25 mil in that, and that's when it got Microsoft's interest.
It's surprising how fast that went from an acquisition to potentially bundled with Windows 10.
Yeah.
I mean, that's very
less
fast.
Than a year, man. That's less than a year. I think it was April last year the deal was done.
Was Softomotive already built on the Microsoft stack? I guess it must have been, because they couldn't move it that quickly.
Yeah, I think it must have been, as whether they had just brilliantly, top quality code. It was easy to assimilate into the Microsoft ecosystem. But I tell you what, I think this is one of the smartest things Microsoft could do to grow the demand for Power Automate, because you can imagine people are going to start using it. Then they're going to go, hey, how do I trigger that event up in Office 365, or that event in, something in I've got in SharePoint, or in my Dataverse, or Teams, or whatever. And all of a sudden, people are going to start automating all this boring, Control C, Control V are got to be some of the two most used key combinations on the keyboard, right? For moving data around systems.
Keep an eye on the window there for our guest.
I've got an emit. Oh my gosh. Okay. Here we go. I will admit him in. And how timely is this, right?
There we go. You're right in the middle of the conversation.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Stephen, have you got us there? I can see you popping up. We're waiting for, there he goes. Mr. Siciliano, how are you?
Now we got to get his audio going.
Have we got your audio? We can see you. You're live and in effect.
Can't hear him.
Oh, still can't hear you.
Still can't hear you.
There you go, Debbie. I'm just turning my volume up a little bit. You're saying I'm low. Can't hear you yet.
Can you unmute him?
I don't have him on mute. I can't control mute here. There you go.
There
we can hear you.
Now we got you. How's it going, Stephen?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. It's always a surprise to me what guest turns up, because I have no idea. He just told me I need to make sure if I see an emit button, let you in, and that's the first I saw your name pop up.
The funny thing is, before you just joined, he was sitting here prattling on all about RPA, and I'm knowing in my mind, in a few minutes, we'll have the guy come on who can refute everything you've said.
Well, it depends on.
Yeah, there's nothing to refute there. I mean, I was just saying yesterday, I did a podcast where I interviewed the founder of from Greece around the product that was purchased. And then I was saying that in the notes or announcements made at Ignite, the desktop is going to be installed as part of Windows 10. I think that's a game changer.
It's pretty exciting. I mean, our goal has always been to, democratize automation as much as we can, and that's what we've been doing with Microsoft Flow since back when it was Microsoft Flow. And the more people we can get taking advantage of automation, the more excited we get. So, yeah.
Then it seems very fast. We were saying, that acquisition was less than a year, right? And historically, you guys with some of the acquisitions in the past, after a year, it still was nowhere, and sometimes then abandoned, much less here's one that in less than a year is now going to be bundled as part of the operating system. That's super fast, real velocity. I mean, we were thinking this thing has to have already been built on the Microsoft. There has to be some way that you guys had confidence to move that from, hey, we just bought it, to putting it as part of the core operating system for the flagship of the whole company.
Yeah, there definitely was an aspect of that there. So when we first were looking at, what are the different companies that we could acquire, obviously we were looking at a number of different vendors. And one of the things that really struck us about Softomotive specifically was the fact that it's built entirely on the Microsoft stack. I mean, it's .NET, it's, all of the Microsoft tech you'd expect. So that was not so much, it was very intentional, let me put it that way, that we picked, a team of people who are very familiar with all the Microsoft technology. I mean, there's other vendors out there that use Java or, other things. And it's, it's not like we couldn't have gotten that to work. But we were really happy to find a company that both was a very good cultural fit, because they're really focused on the democratization, the enablement. Plus, it was also a very good technical fit from a technology stack point of view. And
when you look at some of the past acquisitions that were made under the prior regime, many of which don't exist anymore, I think that was a key trip up. Was they bought some things that weren't built on the Microsoft stack or weren't very much built on a stack, and then trying to convert the idea into, let's turn this into a Microsoft product, just ended up being too big a hill to climb. And like I say, you could have bought some other one, but if you did, it would have been a lot more work, and it certainly wouldn't be bundled as part of the operating system as quickly as this one is. So it was probably worth a premium.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Stephen, when you think about this,
that's one way to look at it.
I know you can't say this, but so I'll say it, and then you can just write off the back of it. But if this isn't an unbelievable Trojan horse to get into people's desktops, the whole Power Automate story, you know, because people are going to realize that there will be functionality they can do on the desktop, but the minute they want to engage with cloud, they're going to go to Power Automate and get the full cloud flows as part of that. This has got to be a massive win for you and your team to get, you know, the powers that be that allowed this to transition out to the OS, and therefore the market share or opportunity it's going to open up is going to be phenomenal.
I think when we look at what we want to do with Power Automate Desktop, we were very much inspired with what we did with Office. So with Office 365, we had a very similar strategy where we said, okay, where is it that there's a need for cloud automation, right? And the answer, I mean, we're talking like 5 years ago now, but the answer at the time was it's Office, you know, and Office already had some specific areas where they had some workflow automation. You know, there was SharePoint Workflow 2010 and 2013. But we said there's really an opportunity here for a modern automation solution that can really transform what Office has. So that's why we made the decision pretty early on to say, hey, Power Automate, as long as what you're doing is within that Office ecosystem, it's going to be free. And it's going to be free for all those Office users. And what we've been doing over the past, 6 months, we've been saying, like, what is the equivalent for Power Automate Desktop and for RPA? It's not Office 365, because Office 365, we already have the connectors and the ecosystem and the API. So it's like, you don't really need Power Automate Desktop for Office, but the equivalent really for us is it's Windows, right? It's the Windows, it's the operating system. That's where people have a need for a modern automation. And like, not many people know this, but Windows does have some automation built in, right? I mean, you have Task Scheduler, you can, create some lightweight things. You can, people use PowerShell, which is kind of borderline low code. It's code, but really, it didn't have anything like what Power Automate can offer. So that's kind of the inception of this and how we got to where we are today, saying, hey, we really think that Windows users should be able to get the value of this awesome automation technology without a bunch of additional barriers.
Yeah, well, it is the kind of the common denominator across. Idea of RPA is to be able to automate processes across non-Microsoft, across any applications, legacy applications, any applications, and the common denominator of all of them is Windows. It's not Office. Office isn't the common denominator to all those systems. Windows is, so it makes sense to put it there. Is that, in your mind, that stood out to Mark? And actually, he was just starting his way down the list when you joined us, but. It
was the only thing on my list. I reckon this is the announcement for Ignite. If you're in the Power Platform space, is that this tool is going to the desktop. I think, honestly, when I saw that, I was like, wow, that is a game changer. I mean, you think, I've been doing a lot of work lately in customer data platform, customer insights. And, anytime those customers go, we don't have an API for the software, we're like, no problem. We've got a tool now for that, right?
Yep.
Yeah, it's awesome.
So are you in agreement, Stephen, that's the most exciting?
So I am definitely biased. So yes, for me, the most exciting news is definitely Power Automate Desktop and the availability for Windows. I would say there is one other piece of news which I think is interesting that you've probably heard about, as well as the PowerFX piece, which is the fact that we're making a definitive statement that we're going to have this one low code language, and it's going to be a language that's going to be adopted across all the different parts of the Power Platform. And I don't know if you've already seen the kind of the more granular details of that, but like Power Automate isn't there on day one. And part of the reason for that is, well, we already have an expression language. right? I mean, there's the Logic Apps expression language. It's been around. PowerAutomate Desktop also has its own separate expression language, which comes from what they call Robin, is kind of their language that they've been using. So it's going to take us a little while to really go through the process of bringing PowerFX to all of the various endpoints. So it's more of a, for me at least, it's more of a kind of a vision statement of like, this is where we're going to go. As of today, you know, PowerFX as the kind of the open source language for at least PowerApps is really big news for the Power Platform all up. It's more of a longer term vision for PowerAutomate. But yeah, those are the two pieces of news for Ignite, and I'm much more excited about the Windows piece.
I like it.
As soon as I hear the word expression, I start thinking, okay, we just moved away from your typical, what we're thinking of as citizen developer. We just got kind of out of their reach, or maybe it's the upper half of citizen developers that could handle writing expressions. But the vast majority, a lot of those folks, that they're going to trip right there. So I think it's both getting to a single expression language, but then having some sort of an interface over top of it that non-expression writer can write expressions. And if we crack that nut, you know, that's going to open things wide open. And I know there's efforts on that front. Can you talk about any of that?
Yeah, so there are some things that we've already done that I think are in that vein. So like in Canvas Studio, as you're typing expressions, we have the IntelliSense, which is one piece, but the thing that I think is really useful is the live preview of the results. So like as you type an expression, it actually, and it works for different types of things. Like, so it's like, imagine I have an expression with results in a color. Like you can actually see right underneath the formula bar, what is that color? Or if you have an expression that results in a table, you can actually see the rows and columns of that table output right there in the expression bar. So I think that very, very rapid feedback as you work with the expression, so that way you don't have to like, you know, close that thing out, run your app, see what happens, come back, that type of thing. And we don't have that today really for Power Automate at all, right? Where for Power Automate, you have to type in the expression, run the flow, and if it's like the 30th step in the flow, wait for all the other steps. You know, it's not a very pleasant experience. So that is a part of this as well, is not only do we get kind of the runtime component where when the flow runs, it can use PowerFX, but we'll also be able to bring in all of these authoring pieces that make it just faster and easier for people to get started. And I think that will continue to build over time. You know, if you think of Excel, like Excel has a lot of affordances for like browsing the list of available functions that you have in Excel right there, and even more details in context. So I think our goal is to get to a place where it's at least as easy to build an expression with PowerFX as it is to build an expression inside Excel today.
Nice.
AI, I'd love to see eventually a natural language expression builder. You know, and using the AI that we have available in the background to kind of, because they've got that in Power BI. You know, you could just say, I want to see sales for the last 3 months for the top 7 customers or whatever. You don't have to write an expression. It's kind of, I mean, it's showing you some ideas. Is this what you mean? Or is this what you mean? You know, but it's kind of, and that would be really cool if we got that point with the expressions in the PowerApps.
Listen, he can't talk about that NDA content, Steve.
What NDA content?
the fact that that's probably all coming.
What I will say, I mean, I can't say specifically, but we definitely are looking at how we can leverage the best of other pieces of the Power Platform, right? So if Power BI has and I actually, you know, am not quite as familiar with how exactly that's like the Q&A capabilities in Power BI that you're referring to there. Yeah, so it's like, look, we can, I certainly would not be surprised at all if we were looking at ways to leverage that same technology elsewhere in the platform. But yeah, I don't think there's anything in the immediate plans that we're planning on there.
Where do you think we're placed in the fullness of time nowadays?
The fullness of time is always, you know, just across the horizon, right? You know, it's just just getting a little bit closer every day.
Yeah,
just right there. So
I see.
Fullness of time is the end of the world, so we don't want to get to the fullness of time.
I see that we've still got a bit of that legacy workflow engine still dependencies. Are you feeling like you're getting close?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a few stragglers here or there, but we've been continued adding new capabilities into the Dataverse connector.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw the release notes, but like we're adding things around business events, which is something that wasn't really there before. That really let you use like any of the actions in Dataverse as ways to trigger flows. So yeah, I mean, at this point, I would say actually the bulk of the effort is actually on new capabilities, beyond just the raw parity pieces of what was in Dynamics workflow, because we're getting, I mean, lots of customer demand for these types of things. So like business events, it wasn't even a concept that existed in Dataverse originally. So yeah, we're continuing to invest there, and we will. All of those remaining types of issues will definitely get closed out soon.
Yeah,
sooner than the fullness of time.
Yeah,
I mean, it is nice to hear we talked in the last episode, or I think it was the last episode, about the release notes that had come out recently, right? And how we were kind of underwhelmed.
Yep.
And found ourselves kind of making the excuse for Microsoft that we had in the last couple of release notes that, well, as Charles said, we need to go tidy things up. So we can only build so much before we have to go back in and, line everything up, can make sure all the wires, so at some point you got to go back to what you built, make sure it's all tight as can be. And so we've been kind of feeling like we've been missing some big wow announcements for a while, because it's been a lot of work under the covers, cleaning stuff up. So I guess it's kind of interesting then having Ignite follow right behind that, where you've got, I mean, this announcement I don't think was mentioned in the release notes about that. So now we're seeing some. So it's like you guys are saving the good stuff for Ignite.
That is exactly what is happening. Yes. So the way that it works is our goal for the release notes, like the most important thing for the release notes, is to provide visibility for the sets of features that will be kind of enabled by default in the release wave for Dynamics applications. So like if we're looking at the release notes, there's that column that's like enabled for, right? And for the Dynamics applications, these things are going to be on April 1st, or like the exact date depends a little bit on what region you're in, but more or less on April 1st, no matter what. So like making sure that the release notes are completely comprehensive. They include every single feature that will be on by default come April. That is priority 0 for the release notes. For additional kind of net new areas that aren't necessarily tied to that same like release train, the release wave, we do reserve certain things for major moments. So like Ignite, we have PowerFX and we have the Power Automate desktop and Windows. So you will actually see them. They will be published in the release notes document whenever the next, rev comes. But there are cases where we will intentionally leave things out of the document to be able to, have a good story to tell around major moments.
I like it. We've got
we got a question there.
Do you want to ask it, Steve?
Yeah, we got Phil. Phil wants to know, do you think there will be a conversion from XAML-based business rules into PowerFX formulas?
I don't have an answer for that one. I think it is to the business, specifically business rules for PowerFX, I think is in the roadmap section. So that's, we don't have an immediate time frame for that. I think the first step is just going to be enabling PowerFX in those same scenarios. How easy or hard it'll be to build a conversion between the two, I don't think we've really explored that yet. I think it will depend a little bit on how feasible of a one-to-one translation would be versus requiring a little bit of a rethink. So, I mean,
yeah,
we're definitely
hand,
not, like in general, migration tooling isn't something we shy away from. So like for Win Automation from Softomotive, we actually do have a migration tool to convert from Win Automation to Power Automate Desktop. So like we will create migration tooling where it is, particularly feasible and makes sense from a customer perspective. But yeah, the particular scenario is just going to depend on how translatable it is, and also what the demand will be.
Yeah, it's kind of that trade-off that you have to make between, here's a legacy technology that is in use by a lot of people, and we could leverage that or build something that's way better, but they won't be compatible. So now we got to migrate, but do we want to advance the ball or just try and improve this old stuff as much as we can? And you're not going to get too far forward without doing that. And then what's the impact? Do we need to build a migration tool, or can we just kind of make something new and wait for everybody to get around to refactoring?
Well, the XRM toolbox, right? Somebody in the community, it'll be a burning enough issue for them that they will create that tooling, and publish it out there. And it would be a great community initiative that would allow, I could easily see something being in market within 4 to 6 weeks, potentially, if the community drove it, right? Because it doesn't have that priority matrix that Microsoft would be working to. Stephen, what are the big things for your year ahead in your mind? You've gone through a brutal year with COVID and probably not kind of engaged with the folks that you'd normally be eyeballing each day in person. What does 2021 look like for you? How do you, if you could look at your New Year's party for 2022, what will you be satisfied about looking back across for this year?
I mean, I am optimistic about our ability to return to work here in the United States. I think the vaccination rollout is moving along, maybe not as fast as we had hoped, but it's making good progress. So yeah. I think there's a lot of things that we as Microsoft are helping other organizations with. We have the return to work solutions that we talked about, I think, towards the end of last year. And so like there's that piece of continuing to kind of support that effort that I think what we'll do. And also on a purely selfish level, I think it will be, I'm hoping that, before the end of the year, we actually can, have maybe some sort of MVP summit or a conference, or something like that. I think that would be, I would love to be able to do some sort of travel and meet with people before the end of the year, and we'll see how things pan out and how feasible that is. But that's that would be my hope, at least, and maybe I'll just have to be an optimist on that one.
We've all lost our airline and hotel statuses. We're gonna start all over again.
Yeah. We're back to ground zero where we were 15 years ago.
At least one of them. So I really only have status on Alaska and Delta, and at least one of them I think is extending, kind of at least to the end of the year or something. But yeah, it's.
I haven't even looked.
I'll be looking forward to a little bit of that.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
Anything else, Steve? It's been great to have you on, Stephen. Really good to hear your insights. Any kind of key takeaways apart from what you've covered with Ignite now?
Just to dovetail on one point that you made about community building tooling around PowerFX. I think one of the reasons why that actually is very feasible is because it is open source. Yeah. So like literally anybody can just build with that. So I think seeing what the community can build there will be really exciting. And coming back to the core point, just the fact that really anybody with Windows 10 can start building out automation. I'm just really excited to see, like, what do people build? Like, what types of scenarios do people solve that, like, that barrier was there before of having to pay, now it isn't. Like, it's just, and the other thing, this is a bit of a nuance, maybe it's not worth getting into here, but like, you don't even need like an organization account or work a school account to get Power Automate Desktop now. Like literally anybody, even with just like your own personal account, can get started with Power Automate Desktop. So it's like, it's really easy to get started. So I'm just excited to see like what will happen.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, and what the consumption you guys will have to fund behind that will be.
Yeah, well, hopefully, we'll have enough of upsell for all those cloud capabilities that won't be an issue, but we'll see.
Awesome.
Very cool, man. Stephen, thank you very much for taking this time to jump on our show and chat with us and our listeners. And we look forward to hopefully seeing you at a summit soon.
Absolutely.
All right, cool, man.
Thank you.
At the very least on Teams. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Bye.
Ciao, ciao.
Right. See you, Stephen. So your surprise guest surprised you?
Well, I couldn't believe like the subject that I was on.
I was just biting my tongue as you were talking, knowing it was coming.
Yeah, that was definitely a surprise. Thanks, Phil. You're the only one that asked a question there that I came up. PowerFX sounds cool. From Dan there, totally agree. I think, what we're seeing from Microsoft and, this open source thing, I think we're only just starting to scratch the tip of where this is going to go, right? And I say that because I don't know if there's another announcement that there's not, it might be under NDA and I just can't remember, but I think we're going to see more of this kind of open sourcing happen. And I think because, I've always been a big believer as one of us is not greater than all of us. In other words, when we get collective brain power together, people looking at a problem and a challenge from different points of view, the outcomes can always be exponentially larger. And when I saw that kind of, XAML to PowerFX formula straight away, in my mind, I'm thinking of people in the community that were going to jump on this and they're going to release a tool, that will do it. And it won't be that it's like, they will release a tool because it's going to make their lives easier on the projects they're on, right? And they're going to release it to the community.
Most of them end up seem to get released is somebody who's created a tool to solve a problem for themselves and just put it out there, and they tend to the community tends to make these tools that solve these nuisance problems that Microsoft working on the big ship isn't really even paying attention to.
Yeah.
Maybe they're aware of it, but it's not a priority for them because they're not in the trenches working with a product.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
It's the community's popping up these tools that solve these just little niggling problems,
Yeah, and you're right there, Phil. Daro is Scott. There is there's changes with that ribbon workbench and getting the hooks into PowerFX. He made those announcements at Summit, which is quite exciting. Where things are going to move forward in that space. Yeah, it's interesting times that we're in. I had Carl Cook. Or Cookie on one of my podcasts recently that aired, and I couldn't believe he's like got 4 or 5 tools, XRM toolbox tools that he has created. And of course, when I looked at every one of them, I hadn't seen them before. They all solve challenges I know across my career. They were always part of projects, whether it's, auto-generating an ERD diagram, as-built documentation, all that type of stuff that you should be able to script out rather than have, somebody manually do it. And I just saw case after case where he built out these tools that I know that he was solving his own problems that he would have come across project after project, makes them available to the community. We've seen Jonas recently, and, he's a massive contributor. And of course, unfortunately, has recently had a stroke. And you see the impact of his tools. I don't know if you've seen some of the stats of the hours and the millions of downloads, and if you translate that into project work, how many hours, if somebody did that manually without a tool, how many billable hours, etc., that the customer might not have the appetite to paying, yet these tools are really enabling high quality, repeatable outcomes at a fraction, if not a non-existent price, as in from the tool's free. No one's paying for it.
And frankly, most of those tools are built by pretty sophisticated developers.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some tools that somebody can throw out there, but it doesn't do very much. It doesn't get any far. When you think about things like Ribbon Workbench or, Jonas's tools. I mean, these are not tools hacked together, tossed out there. These are pro developers, building these things.
They're staking their reputation on it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's why these guys never want for work or never want for opportunity, because they've established their credentials and what they've provided to market.
Yeah. So I got a question for you. If there's something that is under NDA, but you are unaware of that something, you didn't hear about it, you didn't know anything about it, and you start talking about about something that may be very similar to something that's under NDA, but you weren't even aware of the NDA or the item on the NDA, have you broken NDA?
No. I would say my guess is that wouldn't be the case, and the reason is that it's kind of like, trading stocks with insider information. If you had no insider information and yours is more speculative, I don't know if you've seen anything around the GameStop shares at the moment, and them taking a guy to court around, he put a bet that GameStop that the funds were going to short it, and so he encouraged people on Reddit to buy them up. Right? He never had any inside knowledge. He just he knew the way the industry works. He knew that these knobs would take other people's stocks and use them to buy short the market. They don't care that they're going to roll a business in the process. Now he released that out and he showed that. Hang on a second, he had no insider information. I think as long as you could validate that. We got that document last night. It would be very suspicious if I had tweeted something out, before 6 a.m. Pacific time this morning after me just getting that document. I think I'd have a hard road to hoe. But if you're talking about something, like we indicated with Siciliano there, you talked about, AI-driven voice kind of commands that create that expression. Why I smiled was because you can see this is definitely a discussion that's happened, right? This is definitely on their radar, but of course they can't go, Steve, you're on the money. Well done, mate. Because, they've probably got some patents to put in place. They've probably, got some competitive advantage. They want to nail there first. So I think that, And
that wasn't like some NDA information that I was already aware of.
No, you're speculating.
Speculating, yeah. It's interesting, you talk about the GameStop and just a situation like that where he doesn't even have to know or have a sense of where the market's going to go. If he can get enough people to take an action in one direction, well, then he can bet against it. I mean, he can take the opposite direction. I mean, he can if you've got a strong enough following of people that will pay attention. I mean, I've had some folks tell me that that's what goes on with like Motley Fool. Mm-hmm. That all their tips are really about driving a market in a direction so they can manipulate the market for themselves. So if you got enough followers that'll take your advice, hey, go short this stock, and suddenly
totally. And this type of thing has been done well. In this case, it wasn't shorting the stock. Their job when they were shorted by the hedge funds is to go buy the stock, therefore forcing the price up, because the whole idea of shorting is you think the price is going to drop, right? And therefore you're betting on the price dropping, not going up. And so in that scenario, everybody went out and bought. Like, I don't know, I think there's 7 million people now on the Reddit group on Wall Street Bets, and they bought. I mean, yet again, yesterday, I haven't checked today, but, my stocks in it were up because, once again, they're trying to short. Everyone jumped in and said, let's buy more. And, of course, it's definitely pissing off the traditional brokers, because it's kind of like, who are all these little, what they call retail investors, making these changes?
That all banded together under a Reddit group as a force of impact. Yeah, they're used to all these little retail investors not really having any impact on the market, that they're driving the impact of the market because they're the big brokerage houses. Yeah. But you get a bunch of these retail investors all in a single spot, all hearing the same message and acting on it. They're a force, as that just proved.
Yeah. Do you see Phil's message there? Do you understand that? It doesn't make the Magnus
at Delegate AS has got a parser for XAML flow, so I reckon the bits are out there. I guess he's talking about the open source.
Yeah.
If you build a parser for it, they must be out there. Yeah, it is interesting to see this whole open source motion, coming from the company that called open source cancer.
Yeah, but they changed that, right? When Satya came in, he totally about flipped on that, and of course needed to, right? Because how much Linux is now run on Azure?
Yeah, right.
Phenomenal amounts. It's a no-brainer.
Yeah, you got he had to get off that side of the track.
It wasn't ever going to be a win for Microsoft. If anything, it just showed that Microsoft for a long time was very arrogant in that space because they saw free as a compete. But we all know there's no such thing as free in life.
There isn't any app. There isn't any open source for Apple, is there?
No. That's very tightly locked down.
Yeah, that one's locked down.
And I bet you they're not going to open source that car when they bring it out.
What car?
Well, as in the new Apple car, haven't you seen that battery-powered Apple car that's coming out?
I told you I've been focused on my motorcycle.
Yeah. I tell you, what are you going to do when they outlaw, gasoline, fossil fuels? How's that going to? I bet what they'll do is they'll put fake-sounding engines in your motorbikes.
Oh yeah, well Harley Davidson has an electric motorbike.
Is that right? But it still sounds grunty.
No, it doesn't make any sound. Oh. And that's probably one of the reasons Harley will not sell it.
Yeah.
Very well, because you buy a Harley for noise.
Yeah, and I wouldn't have thought it'd be too hard to create a noise, that didn't need fuel or gasoline to make that a reality.
Well, I think Harley Davidson is obviously the most recognized motorcycle brand, it's at least U.S. brand out there, but I think they're realizing that their target audience for their big, loud motorcycles is aging.
Yeah.
And the younger generation is not interested in big, loud motorcycles. So, they launched an electric bike, trying to go straight after that market, and managed to just confuse everyone as to who they are.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely a changing world, right? A lot of changes going on. One thing I didn't ask Stephen was that whole thing around Power BI, whether that's moved right away, right into the camp now. Looking at the other things in the article, there wasn't a heck of a lot. Yes, there's the PowerApps, which, is interesting. I think, the most interesting part around it is the open source nature. But until they bring in all those disparate systems, we talked about Flow there having its expression language, PowerApps, that needs to all come into, maybe even Excel's expression language needs to all be brought into the same fold here to actually drive value. And then, we're not even seeing then when they start, as you say, plugging AI into that story, where people are going to create ML models and stuff and really, I think, turbocharge, the potential of what you can do with expression language. If someone that had the intelligence to build all that rich functionality then can make it consumable by a citizen developer.
You'd almost have to get to a common expression language first before you can even think about AI.
Yeah.
To have, multiple expressions, that would be too many things to battle. So it's like they gotta fix that problem first. Then it's like we talked about with the ISV commerce. You got to get licensing in place first before you can even think about doing commerce, because you can't do commerce without licensing. So right now the focus is on licensing with commerce to come. And it's probably similar here. Let's get a common expression language first. Once we got that done, now we can go maybe look at AI on top of it.
Yeah. What are you seeing happening in the partner landscape around changes to the partner program? I'm hearing some whispers around things like how do you like a partner index score, something to that effect, which is
the partner value index.
Yeah, something like that. That kind of is got to do with around the success of implementations, that type of thing. Really, I don't know whether the gold, silver status has kind of run its journey, value in Microsoft. And it seems that they're starting to re-look at how there's a bit of a definition around how trust from a customer's perspective is built with a Microsoft partner, or how you validate that they're a trusted advisor. I don't know if you're hearing anything around that.
It's been a problem for a long time that gold, customers made the assumption that, well, gold partner is more qualified.
Yeah.
than a silver partner or a partner that is nothing. A gold partner is clearly more qualified. Well, the reality is that a gold partner just sold more.
Yeah.
They're definitely more qualified at sales.
Yeah.
Because it's still, and everything inside of Microsoft, we were talking before the show, everything is revenue driven. You know, if there's 10 metrics and revenue is one of them, it counts for 90% of the score.
Yeah.
You know, the others don't count for shit.
Probably 99%.
Yeah, probably 99% of the score, and then all these others are like window dressing. But this partner value index is trying to take in some things like you talked about, successful deployments, number of certified individuals, types of certifications, sales and renewal. So we know the sales is 99% of all that crap.
Yeah.
Almost doesn't even matter.
Yeah. Yeah. Dan's saying there are still loads of successful large and small partners who don't get a lot of license sales, but build trust and add business value to customers. I mean, tell you what.
So I had that conversation today with someone from Microsoft, but that exact conversation, because we are not a managed partner. And I was asking, one of the programs I was talking to them about said, well, you really kind of need to be managed. And I said, well, refresh my memory. What does it take to be managed? And she says, well, there's several things, revenue. And then before she said anything else, I said, okay, that's the thing right there. So how do you reach a revenue threshold in a market where we're launching platform licenses at $10 a piece to move people on? You know, our revenue, our volume is growing, but our revenue is shrinking because we're moving people off these expensive SKUs that don't need to be on them, which we had no choice in before. So how does anybody get there?
Exactly. I mean, you know, when I was in Australia running a practice there, we weren't high volume movers of licensing.
Yeah.
Why? Because if you're, one of the things that I think a customer engages you to do, and part of the building the solution for them, is license minimization. It's not like tax avoidance, right? It's license minimization. It's making sure that I'm running the leanest, most optimal ongoing environment. And that includes my licensing costs. And that's one of the things they engage with a partner. And I mean, you know, although we did very well, you know, business-wise, when I left, we were doing 25 million per annum in predominantly just CRM type work. Now, what was the license percentage? It was nowhere up near the level that Microsoft would like to see, because most of what we were doing was services-based work. It wasn't like we never saw, you know, the golden days of yesteryear weren't there anymore for you to sell licenses. There just wasn't the effort. There wasn't the kickback, the return, you know, everything that we used to get was CSA wasn't there anymore. So why would I be incented to do it apart from keeping my, you know, account manager at Microsoft happy?
You know, and to Dan's point there, adding trust and business value to customers is not necessarily the same as adding trust and business value to Microsoft. Those are often at cross purposes. To use a phrase that George Dubinsky paraphrased something I said into something he could own, license-based design. License-based design is a new thing. I mean, we're all looking at, I got, you know, licenses at $100 plus, and I got licenses all the way down to $10. What would you prefer, customer? Well, we're going to design to the lowest cost license required to accomplish the customer's goal. That is in direct contrast with Microsoft's revenue aspirations, you know? Yeah.
And the thing is, Microsoft's not losing money, right? They're not running at a loss. You know, when you see $3 billion is created out of BizApps alone, was the most recent analyst report that I saw last year. I wouldn't be surprised if that's bumped again, right? Microsoft, I think, of any company in the world, was in the best possible position from an employee perspective for COVID, right? They'd been working from home for years. They employed people that had families and didn't require them to show up at the office at 9 a.m. in the morning because they knew they're dropping kids off at school. They expected them to be gone from work by 3 if you did go into the office because, hey, you need to pick up the kids from school. But of course, they would then work maybe 10 o'clock, do a couple of hours then or something like that. They would work their schedule around. They didn't want you in the office. And I think, you know, when I look at all the businesses around the world that were most prepared, even though they had no understanding that COVID was coming, I think Microsoft, we're in such a good position, particularly out in the global subsidiaries. More head office. You see Steve in there. The product team, the engineering team, were much more, come together, worked in the same building, cubicles side by side, that type of thing. So I think it's different for Corp than it is for the subsidiaries.
Microsoft was not only in a good position to operate in COVID times, but they're also in an exceptional position to profit from COVID times. I mean, they got kind of a double whammy there.
Yeah.
And not only did they not get killed operationally from having to make big changes, but they had a huge windfall, from other people now working from home, particularly around Teams and some of those other things. So
totally.
We've reached the end of our time here, Mark.
Top of the hour. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Hope you found that valuable. I'm looking forward to who you've got lined up next, Steve. But with that, thanks, everybody. And